Hello and welcome to SAM Conversations. I am Uday Bhaskar. Today is April 7, 2026. And perhaps, just perhaps, history will recall this day as being very distinctive, but for reasons that are not very flattering in relation to the current US-Israel war against Iran. And the reasons, as I see it, I'm just getting my thoughts together, veer towards the diabolical, and I'm afraid the lunatic. Now, these are strong words to use, but the context is the latest post put out by US President Donald Trump on his personal microblogging site, Truth Social. And it's a very dire threat to Iran. It is so dire, I want to read it as accurately as I can. I quote, this is the US President Donald Trump. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will, unquote. It goes on. But this is to convey the enormity of what is at stake, meaning that if Iran does not accept the deal, as it has been termed, which has been offered by the Americans, then the Trump threat is that Iran as a civilization will be destroyed, never to appear again, never to be born again. There is a certain finality. And to me, there is a kind of embedded double irony. One is America decides to destroy a civilization like Iran. Now, the contrast is striking that America is a young nation. It does not qualify to have a civilizational status. Yes, America has imperial status in the modern context, but perhaps not civilizational. And Iran is inheritor of an ancient civilization. It has pedigree, it has depth. It has faced many challenges. That's irony one. And the most, of course, striking military irony, as it were, is that here are Israel and the United States, both countries with nuclear weapons. Clearly, Israel is the covert, secret nuclear weapon capable nation, piggybacking on the United States. And the US, of course, has the world's largest arsenal of WMD nuclear weapons. It has also used the nuclear weapon in Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, August 1945. And this alliance, this partnership of the US and Israel today with the Trump post is threatening to destroy Iran merely because Iran wanted to acquire the legitimate right in terms of its own nuclear know-how and civilian technology in terms of the program that it was following. So that to me was the double irony, that a non-nuclear weapon state is being threatened in this manner. And we have another 12 hours before it's Wednesday morning in this part of the world, in West Asia, in South Asia, while the United States will settle down to supper, most probably, on Tuesday night by daytime, Eastern time. So to place this in context, I'm very grateful to Professor Madhavan Palat, eminent historian, who has agreed to join us at very short notice. We scrambled the moment we saw this post, and I reached out to him. And I said, Madhavan, please unpack this with your deep water table on empire, on conquest, and more. Madhavan, all yours.
Yeah. Trump, of course, is notorious for giving or issuing all sorts of unholy threats of this kind. And when he talks of the total eradication, obliteration, destruction, etc. of Iran, I'm not so certain what he means, and I'm not certain that he himself knows what he means. But if it is a serious attempt of thinking of destroying a civilization, he should just go back to Iranian history and see how many times the attempt has been made. It has never succeeded. As you know, as long back as 331 BC, Alexander overthrew the Achaemenid Empire. Well, what happened is Alexander became Iranian rather than the Iranian Empire vanishing completely. It is true the rulers became Greek for a while under the Seleucid Empire after Alexander, but nothing much changed there. The superficial Greek culture remained on top. But after the Seleucid Empire declined, already by 224, 227 BC, what is known as the Parthian Empire, another Iranian empire, arose in that area. That is what we call the territory between roughly Iraq and the frontiers of India. And it was a major challenger to the Roman Empire. And it lasted for only 4 centuries, all the way up to 24 CE. So it is not as if it had vanished at all.
So let me get this right.
By another
You're saying 220 BC to about 220 AD, almost 500 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Almost 4 centuries.
Yeah.
Roughly corresponding to the Han Empire in China. Right? Then we have another one, the what's called the Sasanian Empire, which followed immediately after 224 to 650 AD, or CE we call it now, which is a properly Iranian one in that it is considered the most national empire, where the religion was Zoroastrian, which is what we associate with ancient Iran. Now that lasted all the way to 650. So it's pretty long innings we already have for a continuous series of Iranian empires, in spite of it collapsing to Alexander's invasion. But nothing much changed otherwise. The big change occurred only with the Arab invasion of 650, when the Sasanian Empire was overthrown. And the whole of Iran was converted to Islam, and even the Persian language was suppressed for nearly 2 centuries. That's the longest time that an eclipse of this sort occurred. But it was obviously flourishing under the surface, because a recovery took place under what is known as the Samanid Empire, which was a completely national Iranian recovery. And it lasted as long as from 819 to 999 AD. It is one of the glories of Iranian culture and empire building and so on, when the great revival of Persian letters also took place. Now that lasted pretty long, and the Iranian culture had a very extensive field of play right across from the borders of the Byzantine Empire all the way to India. As usual, that was the region in which these empires flourished. It suffered its next catastrophe under the Mongol conquest. That is true. But again, as you know, when the Mongols conquered anyone, the local culture flourished. The Mongols became local. It happened in China, it happened in Russia, it happened in Iran. The Mongols are known as the Ilkhanids, the Ilkhanid Empire. And they lasted all the way until 1353. And once again, we have an extraordinary cultural revival, an imperial revival, under what's known as the Safavid Empire. And that went on from 1501 to 1736. This is another of the glories of Iran. So you have a succession of great empires, the Achaemenid, the Parthian, the Sasanian, and Samanid, and now the Safavid. Now, the only time Iran really went under was because of colonialism. But that happened to pretty nearly everybody, including India, who succumbed to Western power in this sort. So from the end of the 18th century until 1925, it was under the heel of colonial rule, under the inglorious Qajar dynasty in Iran.
Mhm.
And that was replaced by the Pahlavi dynasty, which was overthrown in 1979. Again, it was under Western rule. But there's no question of an Iranian culture being obliterated, or in any sense of the term. The only question was whether it was politically subordinated. And now, of course, after 1979, we know the history. Not only Iranian culture, but everything that they wished to be as independent Iranian flourished and challenged whatever America tried to impose upon them. So it's very unlikely that it can be just like that, overthrown, unless a nuclear holocaust takes place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is what I thought I would come to
Yeah.
later. But would it then be fair to say that from the way you have described the temporal trajectory of Iran going back to the 3rd century BC to where we are now in 2026, from about 300 BC to where we are now, there is a certain distinctive pedigree over the centuries?
Certain what?
I said a pedigree to Iran.
Yes, there is.
And that pedigree is something which I'm saying is very distinctive. Each civilization has its own contour and characteristic. In as much as we talk about Indian civilization or Chinese or Mesopotamia and so on. But if I were to now take this forward and link it back to Donald Trump and America, America is an imperial power. And in many ways, the baton had passed from Britain to America in the last century. And we are familiar with that part of colonial history. But when we look at the modern period, which is really 1945 onwards, when the United States becomes the principal hegemonic power, though it had the former Soviet Union as a countervailing power for a brief period in the Cold War, which is 45 years, how do we frame or interpret the American imperial impulse? I can't think of another word because I don't think colonial would be appropriate here. But the American impulse, I'm talking of post-45, whether it's Vietnam or whether it is more recently in Afghanistan, which we are familiar with, and now in West Asia, followed by the Donald Trump kind of template, which is that if you do not accept our deal, it's always put out in a very conciliatory manner. Then there would be literally, he uses the word hell in uppercase in all the posts that he has put out. So how would you look at that, the American characteristic, in terms of using its power to the extent, you mentioned nuclear, when he talks about destroying Iranian civilization, as you rightly said, I hope it doesn't come to pass, but America has a vast range of WMD, weapons of mass destruction. And will they take recourse to what is, I think, misleadingly referred to as a tactical nuclear weapon to try and bring Iran to its knees, in which case, of course, we are talking about a completely different scenario. But to be accurate, President Trump himself has not used the nuclear word, but his officials have been alluding to it in a very elliptical manner. So it's both there and not there, which is a very Trump kind of trait in terms of how he issues the threats. So how do you look at the American imperialism post-45?
Let us keep aside the nuclear threat. It is a threat, obviously, always used. After all, Russia also has been using it, or periodically talking about it. And Trump is implying it all the time. But it's very doubtful whether they're actually going to use it. They don't need to. What we can see is that Trump can attack Iran sufficiently to subordinate it, or that might be his ambition. And he's got the resources to do so. The only point is whether he's prepared to commit enough of his own men, his troops, to carry it out. If he wishes to do so, then of course he can manage it. But since they always want a victory on the cheap, that may not happen. But Iran has been through this before, obviously, and it might have to succumb to that again. But we must remember that what Trump's words are perhaps extremely crude sounding today. But if you look at the vocabulary of colonial powers in the 19th century until 1945, they were not very different. The way they addressed all the people and the states that they conquered, one after the other, were in very similar terms, without a doubt. you just look back in Indian history, the manner in which a person like Wellesley or Dalhousie or Lytton spoke and addressed the various princes or the opponents that he had to face, it was practically in the same terms. It may not have been terms of quite such vulgar abuse as Trump uses, but it was as aggressive as Trump is, and as offensive as Trump is, and as insulting as they can be. In that sense, there is no difference. Trump's imperial power is he's a frank restatement of the colonial mind of the Europeans of the 19th century until the middle of the 20th. To the Europeans, that now seems shocking because they have abandoned it, or they profess to have abandoned it. They do not use such terms in their relationships with the poorer parts of the world. They leave that particular form of exercise of power to Trump. So Trump to America, and Americans express it in the raw. After all, they told the Vietnamese, "We'll bomb you back into the Stone Age." They said they'll bomb the hell out of Afghanistan. This is their normal language of speaking. And everything that they say in Latin America is similar. So there's not a particular difference about it. Each time they threaten to obliterate, threaten to exercise overwhelming superiority, and this applies to Americans, all the Europeans, and the Russians in colonial times. There's no difference.
There is the old
I think
adage.
Trump is only attempting to re-establish his superiority and his hegemony as before.
I was saying that there is the old adage that power is always hand in hand with arrogance. And it has to be tempered by principle. And I think in many ways, that was the attempt in 1945, when again, to its credit, the United States agreed to the Charter of the United Nations, and that all nations, all countries, big or small, would have a certain locus in the larger global framework. And though it is now long buried, I think after October 7, the rules-based international order is now a thing of the past. And we perhaps will have to wait and watch and see how tonight unfolds, April 7, April 8, and whether President Donald Trump will exercise the extraordinary military power that he has at his command, or would there be a review? And, there's just one strand. I don't know whether time will permit, but I'd be grateful if you could give me a brief comment on this, given your own perspective. There have been rumblings in the United States, both among the political class and among the military, particularly the retired military in the United States, about unlawful orders and whether unlawful orders by the US President, the Commander-in-Chief, and whether ordering the destruction of Iran in this manner, which means the complete, as I said, obliteration, as it were, would that lead to a situation within the US where there would be some disquiet about executing these orders? I mean, it just struck me as...
Yeah, there is certainly a vast amount of disquiet about it, about what Trump is doing. But the Americans have committed any number of war crimes and crimes against humanity in the course of the past 70 years after the Second World War. And if there are people who have objections to it, they generally suppressed it. And they know that they are really not going to be called to order because there's nobody who can call the Americans to order in such a case. So really, that is, I don't think, going to be a very serious problem in itself. The only problem he will face is if he calls up people in a form of draft, as happened in Vietnam. Then, of course, there will be overwhelming opposition. But he doesn't need to. That's what he hopes to do. But I think what is interesting about the whole situation is, why has America chosen to attack in this form rather than what they call the rules-based order? The rules-based means rules whatever Americans chose to be the rules.
Yeah.
It functioned very well for them from 1945 onward. That is, they organize the whole world into a hierarchy of powers subordinate to them in one way or the other. Through a series of multilateral institutions, and they could juggle them around and play with them, and it worked very well. And through that elaborate network of the United Nations and all the associated multilateral bodies, American power penetrated everywhere very well. And it used a vast amount of military power also, but through this system. And it worked very well because it always had the legitimacy of it. Now, why are they abandoning that legitimacy and the effectiveness of that? And why have they forgotten the importance of it? That legitimacy is as important as physical power, in favor of acting as a street side bully in this way. Is it because they suddenly feel they are weakened and therefore have to show it? And why should they feel they have been weakened? Weakened by whom? Not by Russia, not by China, as yet anyway. China hasn't challenged them. Russia supposedly has challenged them, but America has not committed itself to Ukraine yet. So why does America feel itself weakened to behave this way?
Very valid question. The only response I can think of, literally as we are speaking, is that perhaps in Donald Trump's second term, he has allowed himself to be misled by Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And between the two of them, for a variety of reasons, and I'm not even talking about the Epstein files, they have gone down this path. And along this path, I would make another point, which is that observation, that maybe between the two of them, Trump and Netanyahu, there is a misreading of Iranian resolve. And therefore, tonight, if the United States does go ahead with the kind of destruction that it has threatened, there will be an Iranian response. I cannot imagine that Iran will go down without a fight, as it were. And that would completely, I think, change the topography of West Asia as we know it today, in terms of its infrastructure, its assets, and its demography. And that, of course, is not it's a bleak thought in more ways than one. But thanks, Madhavan, for sharing your thoughts, because as I said, this was a short.
May I make just one small comment?
Please.
I don't think Trump is being misled or led by the nose by Netanyahu. America remains the leader in that situation. And Israel is acting under the American umbrella. America also wants to prevent the spread of nuclear power, certainly to Iran. The point is, how do you do it? Do you do it the way Obama did it, or the way Trump wishes to do it? Trump wants the shortcut. And that is what Netanyahu wants. Trump is inclined the same way. He was perfectly happy with the genocide in Palestine. He'll be happy doing this kind of thing. But I don't think he's being led by Netanyahu. They might pretend it is that way, but I don't think so.
But this, I think, is a subject for another discussion. So be warned, you'll be back and we'll pick up the thread from here. But for tonight, I think we keep our fingers crossed and hope that when we wake up on Wednesday morning in this part of the world, Iran would still be a robust civilization. Thank you, Madhavan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for watching SAM Conversations. We will be back again.